The sound of wet footsteps coming out of the bathroom area caught Will's attention, but he forced himself not to turn around and look. He brought his jacket out of the locker in front of him and was closing the door when a hand patted down on his shoulder. "Survived your first week, then," Chris said, and laughed. "Yeah," Will replied, "just about." He'd been nervous about starting work at the fire station, but had only been involved in a couple of call-outs during the week, and he'd coped with the demands of them fine. He put on his jacket and turned to the sight of a half-naked, muscular physique. It was certainly impressive, and made it all too clear that the man he was looking at liked to work out. He realized he was staring a little too intently, though, and dropped his gaze. "So, what are your plans for the weekend?" Chris went on as he moved across the small locker room. Will shrugged his shoulders. "I don't have anything arranged," he answered. "I'll probably take it easy tonight and phone around some friends tomorrow to find out what's happening." Chris turned to face his locker before removing the towel from around his waist and using it to dry his wet hair. It brought his naked ass into view, and Will couldn't stop his gaze dropping to it. He knew he shouldn't be ogling the taut buttocks of a coworker, but he couldn't stop himself. "If you're doing nothing tonight, you should come over and have a drink," Chris said over his shoulder. Will brought his gaze up and considered the offer. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Gavin wanted to meet up," Chris said. "He's coming over to my apartment at 6, so we'll have a few drinks there. You're welcome to join us." Will lifted his hand to look at his watch and saw it was now after 5:30. He'd really wanted to relax that evening, but it seemed churlish to turn down the offer after he'd already admitted he didn't have any other plans. "Yeah, okay," he agreed. "I'll come for a few drinks." "Great," Chris said. He dropped the towel on the bench in front of him, and Will's gaze roamed over a muscled back. It disappeared from view as his coworker got dressed, and he looked away before Chris turned around. The pair of them left the locker room and made their way to the fire station exit. They then moved around the building, but nothing passed between them until they got to the parking lot. "I'll lead you there," Chris said. Will nodded his head and moved across to his car. When he got in, he turned the key in the ignition and waited for the other vehicle to get moving before following. The drive lasted around 15 minutes, and he looked out at the apartment block they came to a stop next to. Getting out of his car, he walked across to Chris, and they remained silent until they were inside the building. "My apartment is on the 2nd floor," Chris said. "We can take the stairs." "Sure," Will replied, and continued to follow. They climbed the steps to the 2nd floor and saw the other fireman already waiting at the door of the apartment. "Hurry up," Gavin complained and laughed. "I'm dying of thirst here." "Shut up," Chris let out and looked at his watch before going on. "We agreed to meet at 6. You're early, so stop carping." "Just get the door open," Gavin went on. Chris let out a laugh when he stepped forward. He got his keys out to unlock the door and led the way inside. "Take a seat and I'll get the drinks," he said. Gavin put a hand on Will's shoulder to guide him into the lounge, and the pair of them sat down. "Did anything happen today?" Gavin asked. "It was a quiet shift," Will replied. "Your first week wasn't too bad then." "I'll take your word for it," Will said and laughed. "I wouldn't get used to a couple of call-outs in a week," Gavin went on. "It can get a hell of a lot busier than that sometimes." They turned at the sound of Chris coming through the door and saw the beers he was holding. He put them down on the coffee table and walked across to a cabinet. Opening it up, he reached inside to pull out a bottle of whiskey and 3 shot glasses. "Let's get the party started," he joked when he got back to the sofa.